Good morning. My name is Gerald Dal Pan, and I'm the Director of the Office of Surveillance and Epidemiology at the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research here at the US FDA. I'd like to welcome you to this two-day webinar, Pharmacovigilance and Risk Management Conferences, New Approaches, Tools, and Technology. I'd also like to thank all the organizers here who worked so hard to make these 2 days possible. I have no conflicts of interest to disclose. So what's the role of the drug regulator? Well, essentially it's access to medicines. And to do that, we assess the safety, efficacy, and quality or manufacturing of the products. We also have an important role in the protection of the public, both during clinical trials as well as after approval when the medicines go into widespread use. And especially over the last 10 years, we're quite heavily engaged in providing information to the public. As the graphic on the right shows, we're a science-based organization, we have a public health focus, and we do this in a regulatory framework. And those three aspects of our work converge to form the basis of our drug regulation. So this is a slide that many of you have seen perhaps in different forms. It's a drug development and life cycle timeline. So before a drug comes to market, lots and lots of work is done. Starting on the left, there's pre-human research, compound selection, and lab and animal studies. Phase 1 sees the first human studies involved in dose ranging, pharmacokinetics, and tolerability. Phase 2 goes into exploratory studies of efficacy and safety and dose refinement. And Phase 3 sees the confirmatory studies of efficacy and safety, and which are used to define the efficacy and safety to support approval. An application is submitted for approval, FDA reviews that application, and if everything is in order, the drug is approved. What follows is a long post-approval period and Phase 4 studies in some cases. And during this post-approval period, the product is marketed and it's used by a wide number of people. During that time, there's continuous monitoring of adverse event reports. As needed, epidemiologic studies of safety may be conducted. Sometimes clinical trials of safety may also be conducted. There are risk management efforts, and perhaps clinical trials of new indications. The graphic is not to scale, and so the post-approval period on the right really is a lot longer than the graphic shows. So what are the sources of risk from medical product? This is a graphic from over 20 years ago from an FDA document. It shows on the left, well, there are the known side effects, some unavoidable, some avoidable. There are medication and device errors, and there are product defects. The avoidable known side effects, the medication and device errors, and the product defects all can give rise to preventable adverse events, some of which can lead to injury or death. And the unavoidable side effects can also lead to injury or death. On the lower right, you see the things that remain uncertain. There are unexpected side effects we might not know about, unstudied uses of the product that may appear in the post-market phase, and unstudied populations that may start receiving the product. All those things and much more are the focus of our post-market safety activities. So what do we want to learn from post-market safety? Well, first and foremost, we want to learn about new risks. We want to learn more about known risks as well, since even known risks can often require more refined characterization. We want to learn about medication errors because the harm from a medical product is related not only to the intrinsic pharmacological properties of a drug or biologic, but also to how those products are used in a very complex medication use system. We want to learn about product quality defects. We want to learn how patterns of use may contribute to unsafe use. And we want to learn also about the impact of our interventions. So what are the Office of Surveillance and Epidemiology's 4 areas of focus? One is pharmacovigilance, We review individual case safety reports, the majority from our FDA adverse event reporting system, but also from poison control centers, the medical literature, and other sources. Pharmacoepidemiology is centered around population-based studies, typically of adverse effects of medicine, but also now on beneficial effects as well, as we get into more studies of real-world evidence. Drug utilization is also an important part of pharmacoepidemiology. Medication error prevention. This is really about building safety into a product early in its developmental life cycle. And finally, risk management. We'll focus on risk evaluation and mitigation strategies, and you'll hear a lot about that in the next 2 days. So some of the featured topics for this conference: process for reviewing non-proprietary name suffix for biological products, best practices for proprietary name design, preventing medication errors by designing user interfaces to prevent medication errors, and also lessons learned from our post-market safety surveillance. The Division of Risk Management will have an overview of their review activities, followed by a presentation on REMS Integration Initiative and development of shared system REMS and implications of a recent Appropriations Act. There'll be considerations for REMS surveys and assessments, the planning and reporting of those. There'll be an overview of FDA's adverse event reporting system, as well as the IND, Investigational New Drug Phase, digital reporting overview. We'll talk about reporting adverse events for combination products, specifically reporting device information and malfunctions for drug-device combinations that CDER regulates. We'll talk about individual case safety reporting data with a focus on quality of coding for both product coding, adverse event coding, and medication error coding. We'll talk about post-market safety surveillance broadly, and we'll finish with a presentation on FDA's Sentinel Initiative. So now I'd like to give you an overview of those things in preparation for the talks you're going to hear. So here's a different view of the life cycle, and it really features our pharmacovigilance, pharmacoepidemiology, and risk management efforts. Again, on the left is the developmental phase of the drug. Then there's the approval by the horizontal line, just to the left of center rather by the vertical line, just to the left of center of the horizontal line, followed by the long post-market real-world use phase. So during development, we learn about the common adverse events of a medicine, and signals of other adverse events may pop up. At the time of approval, the agency works very carefully to develop as precise a label as possible. There may also be pharmacovigilance planning, what we want to look out for in the post-market period, as well as risk management efforts, and post-marketing studies may be planned. With time, we learn more about the less common adverse events, and we refine our knowledge of specific adverse events, and we understand the conditions of use that may lead to medication errors or adverse events. Based on this knowledge, in the lower right, we can revise the labeling, the pharmacovigilance planning, risk management, and post-marketing studies, and this process continues. Observation, study, refinement of knowledge, and revisions of labels and other activities. So the process is iterative. One step follows another and builds on the previous step, and it's incremental. We learn new things as time goes along. So we can look next at this drug development timeline with regard to our medication error prevention. I've again put the pre-human research, phase 1, 2, and 3, FDA review, and marketing in phase 4 on the right. So very early in development, before even phase 1, it's important to consider product design. And our staff are real experts on that. During phase 1, 2, and 3, there's proprietary name review, human factors testing if needed for certain drug-device combinations, as well as review of carton, container, and label design to make sure information on those documents is presented accurately and appropriately. And in the post-market phase, there is surveillance for medication errors. So what are the main sources now of post-market drug safety data? I've listed 4 here. They're some of the principal ones. There's on the left is case reports. These are individual case reports. They come generally from the point of care. At FDA, they mostly, 95% of the time, come from industry. They sometimes come from literature, but they also come from individuals who, be they patients, practitioners, or others, who write into FDA to tell us of a concern they have with a medicine that someone took. Registries are about defined populations. They can be disease-based, a registry of every patient who has a particular disease, or they can be drug-based, a registry of every patient who takes a particular drug. These can have various sponsors, industry sponsors, academic groups, different consortia can sponsor these. Observational studies observe what happens with the use of a medicine in normal practice. Nowadays, they're often based on large databases, be they databases of administrative claims data or electronic health records, but they can also be studies done with primary data collection. These can be led by industry, academia, or FDA. And then there are clinical trials. Sometimes in the post-approval phase, these are done specifically for safety. When they're done for efficacy, of course, safety information is also collected. These are generally sponsored by industry. So post-market safety assessment follows a pattern from left to right here. On the left is signal identification. A potential safety concern is identified, and then it moves to signal refinement. There's initial evaluation of safety concerns, and finally towards signal evaluation, a more detailed assessment that can form the basis either for future study, regulatory action, or sometimes both. So this is a schematic of the system. The data on the top that I spoke about, case reports, registries, observational studies, or clinical trials, can lead to signals, and any of those data sources can lead to signal identification, signal refinement, or signal evaluation. So, how about those individual case safety reports? Well, this is how the reports get to FDA. They start at the point of care, patients, consumers, and healthcare professionals, who voluntarily report to FDA's MedWatch system. They can go to our website, or they can call and get a form, they can fax something to us, or they can voluntarily report to a product's manufacturer. So on the left side, you'll see that 5% or so of all the reports that FDA receives come directly from the public via the MedWatch program, and manufacturers account for 95% of the reports. Manufacturers must report according to certain regulatory requirements, and they must report using electronic means specified by the agency. These then are, all these reports are then coded and entered into the FAERS database. And the electronic format for transmission from industry and storage at FDA is the ICH E2B standard here. You see here a schematic of how we use this at FDA. You'll see on the top, pharmaceutical companies use E2B to submit to FDA. When consumers and healthcare professionals submit to FDA, we of course don't expect them to use this standard. They just can come to our website and fill the data in on a user-friendly website, and then once the data are in our firewall, we convert it to an E2B standard. Then we use the E2B standard in the FAERS data for certain outputs. The bottom shows a system called Mercado. That's an internal data analytics system, as well as data mining that FDA staff use. And then we, on the top right, use the E2B standard to send our certain fields of our reports, those that can be publicly released, to the Uppsala Monitoring Center in Uppsala, Sweden, which is a World Health Organization collaborating center. We have a FAERS public dashboard on our website. People can search for numbers of reports for particular drugs and particular adverse events. And an alternative way for researchers to get such data is through the OpenFDA Initiative. This report here shows the number of adverse event reports that we receive. The number has gone up tremendously, almost threefold in 10 years, from about 670,000 to somewhere close to 2.2 million in 2019. The red are the expedited reports from industry. Those are the ones describing serious and unlabeled adverse events that must be reported to FDA in 15 days. The green represents the non-expedited reports, and the blue are the direct reports, the 5% or so that come directly from industry. You can see here in this graph that we use these data quite frequently to make safety label changes. On the x-axis, you see different sources of data that led to a safety label change in the year 2010. And on the right, you see the percentage of safety label changes that each of those sources led to. By far and away, the largest are the spontaneous reports. Those are the reports in FAERS. And it's about somewhere around 53 to 55%. Clinical trials also account for a number of reports, probably about 17 or 18%. Other sources contribute somewhat less, but in the end, they're all important. So with all these reports, how do we review 2.2 million reports? So when we look a little more futuristically, we're interested in whether things such as natural language processing can aid us in the evaluation of clinical text. And we're working on some pilots in those areas. Suffice it to say that this isn't ready for prime time yet, but we hope someday that this will help us with our review of reports. Clinical texts, which could be the subject of natural language processing, are in IND reports, NDA BLA submissions, product label to tell us whether an event is labeled or not, post-market individual case safety reports, pharmacoepidemiologic studies using electronic health records, as well as in social media, internet query logs. And that raises the question, can social media generate signals? Well, there's been groups that have looked at this, and again, this is not really ready for prime time. This group concluded here that despite the public availability of these data, their appropriate role in pharmacovigilance has not been established, and additional work is needed to improve data acquisition and automation. Now let's turn to real-world evidence. These are large population-based studies. What is it and what can it tell us? So we define real-world data at CDER as data relating to patient health status and or delivery of health care routinely collected from a variety of sources. And real-world evidence is the clinical evidence regarding the usage and potential benefits of risks of a medical product derived from analysis of real-world data. You'll hear a lot about the Sentinel Initiative. The Sentinel Initiative is an expansive initiative, and you'll see here the Sentinel infrastructure on the left is what you'll hear about. The Sentinel system itself is based on queries using predefined analytic tools and a distributed data network. FDA Catalyst is routine queries and interventions or interactions with health plan members. And then, apart from the Sentinel infrastructure, but part of the Sentinel Initiative is the best system, the biologics effectiveness and safety, that our colleagues in CDER, the Center for Biologic Evaluation and Research, run. We developed a strategic plan to keep modernizing Sentinel in 2019, about a year and a half ago, and we wanted to maintain the foundation of Sentinel, preserve our long-term investment in this, but diversify the data sources, move not only into claims data, where we have lots of experience, but into electronic health records and claims data linked to electronic health records. We want to incorporate more advanced analytics, such as natural language processing, and we want to broaden the touch points for Sentinel's development, and have more people involved in it, and perhaps even be able to use it. And toward that end, establish a Sentinel scientific community and disseminate the knowledge that we learned from it to improve health. So in September of 2019, we awarded for the third time in 11 years a new contract for Sentinel. The Sentinel Initiative now has 3 different centers: an operations center, which is responsible for enhancing the infrastructure and running the queries, as outlined on the left; an innovation center. This is all about advancing the science, those advanced analytics, natural language processing, and electronic health records. That'll be their task over the next few years. And then community building and outreach. This has its own center now to engage the community, to catalyze new ideas for Sentinel, and new public portals to enhance search information. So let's move now from our pharmacovigilance and pharmacoepidemiology initiatives to our medication and error initiatives. Medication errors, as everyone knows, are a global public health burden. The estimated cost of inpatient and outpatient preventable medication errors is $21 billion. And among adult outpatients, 52% of adverse drug reactions were found to be preventable. Among inpatients, 45% of adverse drug reactions were found to be preventable. So there have been over the years, and continue to be, many important initiatives to make patients and practitioners more aware of the potential for medication errors in attempt to reducing them. So the number of medication error reports submitted to FAERS has also gone up. After a steady rise between 2010 and 2014, there was a jump in 2015, and now we receive somewhere between 100,000 and 120,000 cases per year. You can see that almost 20,000 of them result in a serious outcome, and the remainder don't. But it's important for us to know about all of them, because a medication error that doesn't result in a serious outcome today may result in a serious outcome tomorrow. So the sooner we learn about it, the sooner we can try to do something to prevent some tomorrow's serious outcomes. So what do? We look at companies' proposed proprietary names, and we in OC are the primary or signatory authority on the review of those names. We look at the non-proprietary name suffix for biological products. We look at the product labeling, instructions for use, medication guides, and labeling. We look at the product packaging. We look at human factors and product design features for drug-device combination products regulated by CDER. And there's a post-market pharmacovigilance program that looks at the individual case safety reports that have a code for medication errors in them. So you'll hear about those programs. So I want to turn now to our role in risk management programs. We have a long experience with risk management at FDA for over 30 years. A variety of terms have been used: risk management program, risk minimization action plan, and for the last 13 or so years, risk evaluation and mitigation strategy, or REMS, which you'll hear lots about in the next 2 days. This here shows a timeline going back over 30 years, 1988-89, when FDA approved Clauserol's so-called no blood, no drug program to ensure that patients had white blood cell counts measured before they received Clozaril in order to prevent agranulocytosis. The pregnancy prevention plan for Accutane, isotretinoin, was also put in place then. In 1992, there were some regulations finalized that would allow, amongst other things, restrictions to assure safe use. 1998 and 1999 saw some widely publicized approval using those authorities for restrictions, and the report Managing Risks from Medical Product Use, Creating a Risk Management Framework was published, and that's the report I was referring to in one of the first slides of the sources of risk from medical products. In the early 2000s, there were some more drugs approved with risk management plans and risk maps, and some guidances were issued in 2005-2006. In 2007, the FDA Amendments Act was passed, and it gave authority for FDA for, amongst other things, the authority to require companies to make safety label changes, to conduct post-marketing safety studies when certain conditions were met, and again, for certain products that met certain conditions, the authority for risk evaluation and mitigation strategies to be put in place. And then in 2008, we started putting this into place. What is a REMS? A REMS is a risk evaluation and mitigation strategy, a risk management plan that uses risk minimization strategies beyond professional labeling, and it's designed to achieve specific goals to mitigate risks associated with the use of the drug. These are required to ensure that the benefits of the drug outweigh the risks. REMS can have multiple components. They can include medication guides, communication plans, certain packaging and safe disposal technologies for drugs that pose a serious risk of abuse or overdose, and elements to assure safe use, which has created a new word in our language, itasu, and in some cases an implementation system. They also have to include, very importantly, a timetable for submission of assessment of the REMS. So medication guides are patient-friendly paper handouts that are required to be handed out with many prescription medicines. These are also approved as part of labeling. Initially, we included all new medication guides as part of REMS, but in 2011, we reversed that policy, and we have a guidance that explains our current thinking on when medication guides should be part of REMS. Communication plans are FDA-approved materials that companies generate and disseminate, and they're used to aid the company's implementation of a REMS and to inform healthcare providers about serious risks. These may include drug fact sheets, letter to professional societies or healthcare providers, and patient safety information that prescribers can use to counsel patients or to provide to patients. A recent addition to the REMS armamentarium was from the Support Act, Section 3032. FDA may require unit dose packaging that provides a set duration and/or safe disposal packaging to be dispensed to certain patients if FDA determines that doing so may mitigate a serious risk of an adverse drug experience occurring from abuse or overdose. FDA must, of course, consider the potential burdens on patient access in the healthcare system. Elements to assure safe use. There are these are medical interventions or other actions that professionals need to execute prior to just prescribing or dispensing a medicine to a patient. They may include the requirement for prescribers to have specific training, experience, or certification, pharmacists or other dispensers be specially certified, the drug be dispensed only in certain healthcare settings, drug be dispensed with evidence of safe use conditions such as laboratory test results, each patient using the drug be subject to monitoring, and each patient using the drug be enrolled in a registry. An implementation system is also required when certain elements to assure safe use are in place. The REMS assessment has to include a timetable. The default is 18 months, 3 years, and in the 7th year, or at a frequency specified in the REMS itself. And typical timetables for medication guides and communication plan. REMS are 18 months, 3 years, and 7 years. REMS with elements to assure safe use, 6 and 12 months following approval and annually thereafter. So that's been an overview, a whirlwind overview of what we do here in OSC. And you'll hear a lot about each of these initiatives over the next 2 days. So I wish you a good 2 days of seminar and hope you find it valuable. Thank you.